So when I was younger in school, all my teachers said, if you're unhappy, change what you're doing. I thought about that for a long time. If you're unhappy, change what you're doing. Then once I started getting older and arguably more mature.
Pause. Sorry.
All right, that's my talk.
You want to do it again?
Sure.
Christmas time is here. To be honest, Trevor, you're doing great because I would start crying right about now.
Okay. Should I re-enter?
Yeah, why don't you
Whoa. Don't go up over here.
just keep going?
Go to the trash can.
Here we go.
So when I was younger in school, all my teachers said, if you're unhappy, change what you're doing. And I thought about that for a long time. If you're unhappy, change what you're doing. Once I started to get older and arguably more mature, I thought about that again. If you're unhappy, change what you're doing. Once I got into 8th grade, my opinion on that phrase changed. During the first 2 months of 8th grade, I started talking to a girl. No, it wasn't love, it was just a friendship. But once we got closer, she started talking about her past and her current mental state. She told me she'd been depressed all of her life, along with severe anxiety and other problems, and over time it got worse and nothing helped either of them. At random times of the day, she would get a severe anxiety attack, and the only thing that helped her with anxiety and depression was self-harming. And of course, this affected me too, because she was one of my closest friends. This friend and others inspired me to do this talk. When I started to write this, I thought of the phrase, if you're unhappy, change what you're doing. I started to look into what causes these mental disorders and what can help. Once I started researching it, it hit me. Sometimes you can't change. 5% or 350 million people around the world suffer from depression, and many more undiagnosed. What causes depression can be multiple things like brain chemistry, certain events in people's lives, genetics, or even hormonal problems. Depression affects the hippocampus, which is the memory center, the anterior cingulate, which is the conflict resolution area, and the prefrontal cortex, which is involved with planning and executing activities. These illnesses affect key parts of the brain, and when left untreated, can develop to be worse, which can change the person even more. Wow, that's bad. This is the difference between a depressed brain and a healthy brain. The depressed brain clearly shows less activity in major parts of the brain and responding less to stimuli than the healthy brain. A German researcher named Thomas Frody did a study looking at the brains of depressed and healthy people. The depressed people had abnormalities in several brain areas, as listed before, and the healthy people did not. He then followed them for 3 years and showed continuous decrease in those areas. Frody suggests getting treated as soon as possible, saying it may prevent neuroplastic changes that, in turn, worsen the clinical course. A new study conducted by University College in London shows that there are physical differences in a depressed versus a healthy brain. They studied 25 people with depression and 25 without. They were showed images that resulted in a small electric shock, and the MRI showed an increase of activity in the habenula, an area responsible for governing stress response, learning, sleep cycles, and other vital functions. But with the depressed people, they showed decreased levels in the habenula. This means with decreased activity in this area, a depressed person reacts differently to stress, can affect their learning, sleep cycles, and many more, which can make the person worse. David Hellerstein, an MD from Psychology Today, followed a man named Kenneth, who was depressed for over 30 years, which became worse after the death of his wife. He socially isolated himself, avoiding many friends and family, and spent time ruminating on his problems. Ruminating means obsessing over things such as the death of his wife and other problems. One of the major parts of his treatment was trying to get him to stop ruminating, such as volunteer work, spending time with loved ones and jobs. After a while of treatment, Kenneth was able to stop obsessing over his problems and did enjoyable activities and got enjoyment out of them for the first time in a while. The National Institute for Mental Health says that over 40 million people in the U.S. over the age of 18 suffer from anxiety. The same institute did a study and found that amygdala, and the hippocampus play significant roles in most anxiety or disorders. The amygdala is believed to be a communications hub between the parts of the brain that process incoming sensory signals and the parts that interpret these signals. It can alert the rest of the brain that a threat is present and trigger a fear or anxiety response. The area can be triggered by memories of bad experiences or phobias, such as dogs or heights. Anxiety is part of your body's response to stress. Your fight or flight response is triggered, and your body gets flooded with the chemicals norepinephrine and cortisol, which increase your perception, speed, and reflexes. Anxiety is a warning sign that you're about to do something that you don't want to do, but biologically its purpose is to put us in a heightened sense of awareness, so our bodies and mind is prepared for potential threats. For people who have an anxiety disorder, their bodies never turn off the fight or flight response, and those people live with the physical and emotional symptoms every day, even if there is no reason. Now, you may be asking, why don't people get help? Why wouldn't people with depression or anxiety go to a doctor, get antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication, go to a therapist or psychologist, and get help? I asked the same thing about my friend. I pondered this question for weeks before I had the courage to even ask her. I finally did, and her response was, I don't want to get help because everyone will make fun of me. And I sat there and I thought about her response as well. Why would someone make fun of you for trying to live a better life? A website, mentalhealth.org, states that people with mental illnesses say the social stigma around these illnesses and the discrimination they receive can make their symptoms worse and can make it harder to recover. Most people who have an illness live long enough to overcome it or live with it, especially if it gets treated on. The website also says nearly 9 out of 10 people with mental illnesses say that stigma and discrimination have a negative effect on people's lives. Society has stereotyped mental illness and how it affects people. People are making fun of people that are struggling, such as photos like this or photos like this. These people making fun of people with these issues can prevent them from actually treating them. I have heard this all my life, and I continue to hear it to this day, that a lot of people say, it's all in your head, it's just a phase, lots of people have it worse, or it's not real. Many studies from experts have shown changes in people's lives, health, and brain chemistry, but some people don't believe it. Treatment can help with this. Your brain releases a happy chemical called serotonin, but when a depressed brain releases serotonin, something in the brain reaches out and grabs it and brings it back, therefore eliminating the effect of the happy hormone. This is a major cause of depression because the happy hormone obviously makes you happy, and without it, you aren't. Certain antidepressants work in a specific way, so when the serotonin gets released, the antidepressant chemicals go to the thing that reaches out and blocks it from grabbing the serotonin. This means the serotonin gets released into the brain, so eventually you can feel more happy. Anti-anxiety medication works in a similar way. With the help of medication and therapy, millions of people could recover from depression or anxiety, and one of those people could be you, your spouse, a family member, a friend, or your child. In the U.S. alone, a person commits suicide every 12 minutes, and 44,000 people die every year from suicide. With the help of recognition, one of those people saved could be you, your spouse, a family member, a friend, or your child. Thank you.